So today Martin joins me, and in the run-up to the World Cup, South Korea are in the headlines once more. They've got a fascinating team, and I'm going to be joined by Martin today speaking about that. Martin, welcome to the podcast.
No, thank you very much for having me. Looking forward to speaking a bit about Korean football.
Absolutely. So let's start off then domestically and what Koreans are producing back at home. We know that there's a lot of European talent within the ranks there, but back at home, what's South Korea been like?
I think it's been relatively successful for an Asian nation. Probably getting left behind a little bit in terms of the domestic talent going to Europe alongside Japan. But generally, Korean football is solid. Still not kind of chasing for continental glory or anything from that respect. But I think the pipeline of talent going early to Europe has really seen the progress in the national team over the last 5 to 6 years.
As someone who I don't think's really ever touched upon Korean football too much, for young players coming through the ranks there, what is that like? Is it easy to be access to football over there?
Yeah, I think following the 2002 World Cup, I think football became a priority sport, or one of the sports alongside baseball and other kind of areas, as an opportunity for young people to actually go and make a fortune, be that in Korea, but also kind of externally. And seeing that aspirational opportunity to do that. And I think the framework in place gives them that opportunity. Now, as I say, it's not like Japan, where you potentially have a lot more finances behind the league. However, there are those opportunities to kind of make it across. And when you've got a global superstar like Son Heung-min really to kind of aspire towards, you can see that it's a more exciting prospect for a young person in Korea now.
I think this group is arguably one of the most interesting that I've seen. I think it's full of talent, but it's also full of teams that are along the same sort of level. So the first match that South Korea have is Czech Republic. How do you see them matching up against them?
I think the group in general is quite positive. I think any time that you are drawn against one of the hosts as the seeder teams, you feel that at least there's a positive opportunity to do that. I think Czechia, are very similar to any other European team. I think it's going to be a difficult prospect from that respect. And I think some of the preparations going into it is that Korea are expecting it to be more of a physical aspect, change from that. However, I think the experience that they've had over the last couple of World Cups, and given the quality of players coming through, they're going to aspire to actually start challenging them from that respect. So I think how they'll set up in all three matches is quite conservative, trying to ensure that they are managing the play where possible. But the real strengths of this side are in the attacking areas, both from Son Heung-min and from Lee Kang-in. Really kind of high-class players in terms of kind of have that opportunity. And I think Czech Republic on paper don't look the kind of the team that should have the beating of it, but given the opportunities in place, I think we have a real opportunity to kind of get out of this group, and this is one of the key ties to kind of get off the mark from that respect.
I think a lot of the sides they can aim for 3 or 4 points. I think that actually could be enough for the best ranked third place teams to be going through. Obviously, the expansion of the World Cup allows for that. Do you think that South Korea are going to be topping this group? And if not, who are the main contenders for that?
I think on paper they should be. They should be kind of aspiring towards that. The issue for Korea is that there's just generally been a lack of consistency following qualification. Hong Myung-bo is probably not the best suited for the coaching role. He probably doesn't want to ideally be there, but he's kind of been allowed to kind of continue on in this role following the qualification to the World Cup. Given the players on paper, they should be kind of aspiring to top this group. I think the form going into it and maybe the inconsistencies around formation may kind of start to struggle. Mexico are going to be obviously the key favourites in this, aside from Korea, given that they're at home and given the experience they've had before. But as you say, from the top, I think this group looks, as much as kind of there's a lot of established teams within there, a lot of them have got question marks against it. So it's who kind of reacts best from having those challenges put to them.
It's really interesting because from what I can see on the outside looking in, South Korea look like a really dangerous team that could potentially beat anyone. I mean, that is the luck of the World Cup. But in terms of the travelling support, can we expect a lot of South Koreans to be heading over to the States or Mexico?
I think the question mark will be the opposite in terms of how many diaspora are going to be out there to support the team, and I think there's been a lot of regret, I suppose, that Korea have been based in Mexico and doesn't have initially the opportunity to go to America, given the significant Korean population within the States. But that said, they always kind of travel quite well. There's always diaspora in other locations, and we've already seen in the last couple of weeks, having bedded themselves down in Mexico, the support are already out there and actually starting to kind of come behind them. So, as always, East Asian kind of teams have that backing in great numbers, and that definitely won't be an issue once we get round to kick-off.
Of course, and it's obviously on Son Heung-min's home turf, if you like. I know it's not quite the same country, but what have we made of Son out in this days? He's got a hell load of assists, but maybe not scored as many as he would have liked.
Yeah, I don't think maybe he is from a question mark perspective, is he winding down from that respect? And I think there's been a focus from Korean football that potentially he's taking it easy as he's moving towards the latter end of his career, but with this in mind in terms of being at his best for the World Cup for Korea. And Son he's significantly got a kind of a passion behind for his national duty. Being that kind of pinnacle face of the national team is really significant for him. And I think given his form moving into it, and given obviously his aging legs from that respect, I think we'll see that kind of reflected into potentially how his gameplay is managed. If we're expecting Korea to potentially progress through the group, and I think it would be a significant failure if they didn't progress through the group, his time could be managed during these early stages. Given his less prominence in terms of being that kind of talisman of the team, you've got Lee Kang-in, you've got other players that are on form, it would give an opportunity to potentially be a more of a super sub role, especially in those earlier games, to actually start being kind of his minutes managed ahead of the round of 32 onwards. Because really what we're kind of expecting both from Korea and from Japan is really it's a bare minimum to get out of this group, and we want to be seeing them kind of progress through that. Last time around they got Brazil in the knockout phase and really kind of were up against it. We're hoping for a better kind of route forward, so it just gives an opportunity for others in the squad to come through and hopefully contribute to that success.
I think it's also really tough for players like Lee Kang-in, because at PSG he is overlooked a lot of the time because you've got that incredible front line. Obviously Luis Enrique is probably the best manager you want in that situation, because he does seem to have two teams that he consistently plays. But what have you made of him in Paris this season?
I think it's been a really good experience being, as you say, under such experience and quality of manager in terms of Luis Enrique, but also being in that environment of winning things, in terms of winning the Champions League, etc. I think the next step in his career is to move elsewhere, and I think there's already been rumours about him being linked with Atletico Madrid, and that would be the next kind of stage for it. But it's light and day in terms of his contribution to the national team from it is today that it was a couple of years ago, but in the Asian Cup. His commitment and his quality in the final third has gone up tenfold. At the same time as when obviously Korea were looking around going, who's going to replace Son Heung-min after this kind of run of form, I think Lee Kang-in's kind of being that key element. Where he'll play in the setup, I think, will be the key question, and it'll potentially be who else do you play alongside him. There's been a couple of younger players that are coming through, so Yang Hun-jun at Celtic and also Bae Jun-ho at Stoke have been kind of on the cusp of kind of breaking into that team. So it depends how central Lee Kang-in will be and how his relationship both either with Son from the start or Oh Hun-gyu is also another player who's in form since his move to Besiktas over the last few months. So they've got a number of options in the attacking areas. I think attacking wise there isn't an issue in terms of the individuals. It's probably the approach in terms of Hong Myung-bo's kind of approach to things and whether that restricts some of that opportunities in the final third.
They've definitely got the experience through players like Son. I think that's not really in question. But in terms of what they've managed to do in some previous World Cups, 2002 was obviously semi-finals, a pretty historic one for them, and 2010 and 2022 was round of 16. So I think the main objective for them would be to just break through that round of 16 hurdle with the extra games that you've got in the round of 32.
Yeah, and I think that goes across all Asian teams at this World Cup. I think it was the best World Cup for Asian teams in 2022. But nobody progressed past the round of 16. And now you've got an extra round, I suppose, in terms of the expanded World Cup. That kind of makes it a little bit more tricky. But I think Japan, in particular, are going to be looking towards kind of the last 4, last 8. Korea, probably their expectations are a bit more suppressed, given the kind of maybe the criticism of the coach and kind of how it's set up. But the players, as you say, have got the experience and the quality to really break through and actually make a promising approach to this. I think a lot of it will come down to how attacking and how kind of confident do they want to take this. It's a group on paper that they should be able to compete on and start to think, oh, could we actually top this group? The issue is that we've seen with the coach previously in other World Cups to actually take a bit more of a backward step in terms of that focus. So it's a very much a limbo state as we're in this transition away from maybe the experienced players towards that promising youth. How will they play once they actually get into Mexico and actually start the ball rolling?
In the AFC qualifying, obviously South Korea went unbeaten, they had a very good run of form, but I think it's really difficult to compare what that form would be like in a World Cup because you are ultimately playing against weaker sides in Asia. Is that a criticism perhaps of what the South Koreans or Japan could be exposed to because they're playing against such weak sides?
Yeah, I think it's always going to be the case, especially with expanded World Cup, that kind of elements of jeopardy probably wasn't there like it has been in previous years, and obviously the Asian Cup being directly after the World Cup as it stands at the moment, that's often been kind of underplayed as an option because you're kind of 6 months after the World Cup, you're in transition and that side of things. I think the criticism of that would be that you haven't got those opportunities to play one another. So Japan and Korea haven't played one another in competitive football during the last few cycles because of their kind of seeding and how they kind of get separated. But they've really put focus in terms of playing those. So they played Brazil, they played USA, they played Mexico. So they have gone out there and kind of tested their mettle. The issue for Korea is that they are retreating back to kind of more of a defensive focus instead of kind of taking them toe for toe. And I think very much we will see over this tournament is a transition. And the question mark will be, how do they finish this and where do they go to in the next Asian Cup? Because really what we should be looking at is to dominate Asian football. But unfortunately, over the last probably 8 to 10 years, that hasn't been the case. Qualification's always been kind of a certainty, a near certainty, but probably haven't gone further than that. The question mark is how do they get through to the next level, and that'll be interesting to see over the coming weeks.
Defensively, though, from what I can understand, in the last 8 wins they've kept 8 clean sheets. It seems to me that they do have quite a good defence, even though you highlighted their prominent attack. So what can we make of their backline? Because a lot of those players play in Europe.
Yeah, I think it's been a positive to get more players into Europe, so you have got those experiences. As I say, it's more the case of systems and an approach from that, and I still think going into the World Cup, they still haven't got an idea of what their best team is, whether it'll be a 3 at the back or a 4 at the back. Obviously, whatever formation they go, Min-jae is going to be the kind of key kind of cog within that. Very similar to Lee Kang-in in terms of playing at a very established team at Bayern Munich, but probably on the fringes and probably not getting the same amount of minutes that he would want to have. And again, looking for a new move following the World Cup, which is obviously an opportunity for Korea and for the individual to kind of give that kind of place in respect to that. I think what we'll see probably from Korea is what we've seen in previous tournaments, probably with that kind of baton being passed quite slowly from Son to Lee, and we'll kind of see how that kind of plays out. The question mark is, do they have a little bit more ambition to actually take this forward? Because I think the raw materials are there. The concern for me would be, as you said, defensively they're okay, they're quite assured, so they might kind of rely on that and probably having tighter games, and that's on a knife edge in terms of how games play out. When you look on paper, those 3 teams are at least challengeable, so they should be kind of pushing forward and actually starting to win games. Whether we'll see that tactically, I'm not too sure.
And the last question I've got is, you've been hovering around, the round of 16, round of 32. Where will South Korea finish in this World Cup?
I think a difficult group would have probably posed more questions in terms of whether they could progress as one of the top 2 teams. I think given the teams on paper, they should be looking to kind of progress as one of those top 2 teams. However, as soon as they face a team that is going to offer them a little bit more challenge, I would be concerned about it. I think the form of the team, as much as they're getting through and they're probably getting the wins on paper, probably when you watch them live, they don't exactly kind of inspire confidence from that respect. So I'd imagine that they would potentially get through the group in second and potentially go out in the round of 32 from that respect. I think that would be a failure. I think they want to be kind of pushing it forward to the round of 16 into the quarters. But I think that's probably where everyone kind of expects from Korean football. This is a transition kind of aspect, and hoping that this will kind of progress through to the Asian Cup and beyond. Anything more than that, I think, would be a bonus at this stage.
Well, thank you very much, Martin.
No, thank you very much for having me.